Right, this is going to be an episode of the Kalshi Esports Crystal Ball, where we are going to be using Kalshi, which, if you don't know, is the first and only federally regulated prediction market in the US. It's available basically all the states, as far as I know. It actually has lots of different markets for all sorts of things, political things, things to do with like will inflation go up, who wins the Oscars. There's all sorts of cultural things you've no doubt heard about, markets, etc. But it now has esports and our beloved Counter-Strike. So it's pretty simple to work. When you go to the site, if you go to the sports section, there's a subheading esports. If you go there, it'll have things like we're going to preview a couple of the matches for the major playoffs. It has things like who wins the major itself, who's going to be the MVP, all different aspects of that. You can do the events, you can do the futures. There's a whole bunch of different predictions you can make. It's really simple to use. Essentially, all you're doing is yes or no. You see by the percentage next to whatever the topic might be, how likely people think it is based on who else has bought yes or bought no. And then essentially you just pick that. So to give you an example of how it works, if you look at the one that says, will ZywOo be the MVP of the major? Obviously, the number isn't enormous, because if it's not him, if you pick no, any other player being the MVP means you win. So in that scenario, it's about being right, but it's a way to, first of all, track what other people think, what they think is going to happen. And then also, it's a way to be correct. And since it's yes or no, it's easy, isn't it? So go to Kalshi.com and use promo code LFN, make your first $100 worth of trades, and you'll automatically receive a $10 bonus. That's Kalshi.com, code LFN. Kalshi, the CFTC regulated prediction market for esports and beyond. Right, so I was looking at these markets and I thought the most obvious ones to do, this is the day before the second set of quarterfinals, is we could just do those two quarterfinals. Gives us an excuse to have a few narratives, a few angles, and then I've got another one for like who the overall winner will be. It's a bit spicy in light of today's results. So for the first matchup, that is the one that is going to be MOUZ versus FaZe. Now, MOUZ being here, quite obvious, hence why, by the way, MOUZ is the favourite right now. As of this moment, they have 71%, is that they will be the one who wins this game. FaZe only at 29%. So the first question, obviously, here, Hawka, is, do you actually think FaZe Magic is still real? Can it happen?
I mean, it was impressive in the previous stage, but I guess we'll get into in a little bit. Part of the problem I am going to have with this is that we already saw how long it took Jacob to adapt just to doing well in this previous stage. I feel like that's probably going to hold true when going into major playoffs as well. And his uptick was a huge reason why they were able to get here. So if you believe in the Jacob angle, you could definitely make the case for it. But I'm going to way more assume that, again, he's going to struggle to adapt so quickly. And that's normal, by the way. It's normal for a player to do that. Most players aren't like Donk and don't come into their first major and do incredibly well. But I think without that, it's kind of hard to make the case for FaZe, at least in my opinion.
No, I mean, the obvious thing to me is the Jacob angle, because if people don't know, I actually think I'd have more belief in FaZe if it had just been the twists and throws and show every single game like it was before. But if you saw in those other stages, like I remember in stage 2, Carrigan was like entering at some like absurd like success rate, which is like, that'll last. And then also, as you say, the Jacob guy carried stage 2 and stage 3. He looks exceptional. But I'll give you two angles here. One is I'll just give him the immediate get out of jail free, which is, mate, if you're a pure rookie and you make it to the playoffs of a major, I expect you to fail. Like, I don't blame Senzu when he failed or Molodoi last minute. Like, that is actually what happens to most people. Like, most people, it's like in the Matrix, no one makes the first jump. That's why Donk is an alien. Like, I still don't know how he just didn't completely fail at his first major. He's just like the only one ever somehow. Even ZywOo did at times, if people don't know, guys. Like, everyone did. So I'll give him the break there. Then the other one is this. Even though normally other people would actually go the opposite way to be on a desk about this topic. But you have to forget that it's actually a famous thing in Hungary, believe it or not, that because of their close proximity and shared cultural history, that Hungary and Poland consider each other like brother nations, basically. So if you're Jacob, you're also sort of playing to a home crowd, by the way, mate. Like, as long as you're not playing, in this case, you are playing Torji. But aside from that, you're probably the other player actually people will cheer for. I've no doubt, by the way, that actually, and much people want to believe, like, home crowd. I could believe that could put a lot of pressure on you too. I imagine maybe your family travel to this game and watch it, you know. They've seen the results online, so they're probably even delusional and think you're going to win the game or whatever. So the sad thing about this for me, mate, is normally, if this is how you know I don't really believe in FaZe Magic anymore. If there was ever a team you could get with FaZe Magic, surely it's MOUZ. Surely MOUZ always turn up to these big playoff games like After you, they're very British. After you, sir. No, after you. You first. Like, mate, if there's ever a team would collapse and you'd get them with some nonsense shenanigans on stage, you'd think it'd be this. But the problem is, though, I'm just impressed FaZe made it to this point, mate. I don't really believe they can actually win this game. I just don't.
Yeah, and it's also like the FaZe Magic thing, that's cool when you're doing it in the playoffs. When you're doing it to get to this point, it's not cool anymore, is it? It's just a bit sad that you're having to do that to get to this point. And the other thing I will add is a couple of their wins that they got in that previous stage against like a 3D Max and a Passion UA. I think those teams, especially 3D Max, they just kind of take fights at you. And I think that suits Jacob very well because of his aim. And I think Passion UA were surprisingly sloppy in that series also, especially on that Mirage. I think that gave way more opportunities for these fights that were a little bit looser, a little bit scrappier. And maybe that happens in the playoffs. Sometimes the nerves get to people and it does come down to aim just a little bit more. But even then, I wouldn't expect MOUZ to necessarily be like that now. I think we've seen enough from MOUZ that at least in the early stages of playoffs, they're normally going to be okay enough at that. And generally, it's more with MOUZ that you would expect maybe the overall cooling to be a problem, but I wouldn't expect the actual team play to be an issue. Like, I'm not expecting Jacob to get all these really comfortable 1v1 fights that I felt like he was getting in a lot of these previous matches. And that's before you even consider they did kind of get the losses against Mongols and Spirit. They weren't even really that close. Like, they kind of got owned on both those. So yeah, I find it hard to make this argument, sadly. You really have to fully have faith in Karrigan. And my issue is I just don't know if FaZe will be able to drag the game deep enough for that to actually be a factor in the first place. That's my fear here.
Also, a classic angle, I always hit it for the last few majors in all of my videos where I do the preview for the veto, etc., is Karrigan is probably the most creative vetoer ever, especially in big pressure matches. The problem is he's not got anything to work with. Like, he hasn't got a specialist map right now. He hasn't even actually got a map that FaZe know they're really good. If you notice, they keep switching up the pick even. Like, basically, at this point, unfortunately, it's going to be a rare time where it's something an open book. Like, also, if you're MOUZ, it doesn't really matter what map they pick. You've also just got the firepower to handle them on any of them. So I have to say, that one I'm actually, despite the fact that I know in your brain it's like, but FaZe in the playoffs, that's a little bit long in the tooth, that narrative. Whereas here's what's funny, Hawka. I feel like when I went and saw every single expert and all the rest of the people, and some of them, I don't know, some of those people get on that graphic, but some people just be the cousin of the guy who makes it somewhere. When they make that massive graphic thing and they show all the people's pick'ems, bro, the most dominant matchup on paper for everyone else is this next one. It is FURIA against NAVI. Like, people just do not, even though the market, by the way, is not too dissimilar to the one we just talked about. FURIA 74%, NAVI 26%, so basically roughly like a 1 in 4 chance, a quarter. I have to say, everyone seems to think on every level, Navi's cooked it. I mean, they already played the BO1, obviously, at this stage as well, where it was the 13-2. FURIA is considered a much, much better team, the main favourite for the tournament. Most people don't even have NAVI in the mix to win it. I think everyone I see says NAVI loses this game. Can you make a case for NAVI? Do you have any sort of belief this will be a competitive match?
I said I think it will be more competitive than I think a lot of people are giving it credit for. I feel quite bad for NAVI in this draw because I think in a lot of other matchups, they'd have had a really good chance. Yeah. Like, with how cohesive they've been, against some of these teams that have been playing, frankly, quite loose, I think NAVI, just their system as a whole, I think it could work really well. I think the unfortunate thing is, it feels like you're going up against a FURIA that have a lot of that tactical strength and probably just have better players than you across the board. So it kind of feels like the one matchup that it is hardest to make the argument for them, unfortunately. But there are definitely angles to, like, the fact that Wonderful has been playing so well. We always have said with NAVI, if the firepower is just a little better, this team does become a threat, a real threat. And Wonderful has looked really good. The one that really is annoying me is that if Bit had just played a bit better, I think I could believe way more in this team. But I'm actually just seeing him get caught out and almost outlurked in a lot of scenarios. And that really scares me when you're going up against FURIA, because I think if his feel for the game is off, he will just get caught out. And Bit being good is kind of a win condition that NAVI, it feels like, needs to have. And we just haven't seen that yet, which that's the one that really concerns me.
Yeah, the problem with this one, if you actually want to concoct a way that NAVI wins, is I think you actually have to go into my specialty, sort of like narratives, intangibles, things that aren't directly like a stat or a number on a sheet. So the angle you'd have to go with is something like, To be fair, this will be Molodoy's second major. It's actually not like by the way, the actual FURIA call themselves don't have all that much success in majors in general anyway. It was basically just that one in Rio where they made the semis and they looked good to maybe make the final, but they fell apart against Heroic. Like, they're not super experienced in that sense. You could believe maybe pressure can get to them. By the way, this is actually the only tournament you can probably argue they're the number one favourite to win. Like, actually every other tournament, I think most people still thought after the Vitality final, like, that Vitality will course correct, it'll still be better. A lot of people probably thought Falcons could go head to head with them. They're not even in the tournament anymore. Actually, in theory, if you're FURIA, that's one angling that has nothing to do with NAVI. That is real, which is you drew about as good a bracket as you could possibly get here, bro. Especially considering you have to play actually against one of the teams that's like 3-1 or whatever. Like, you've got to actually... even though this matchup could be easier, you could have gotten like a FaZe or a Mongols or something like that. At the same time, I actually think the problem is essentially I have to believe something will happen that didn't happen at the last 3 tournaments we saw or something. So I'll give it to FURIA and say they should win this. I think that's actually quite fair, the numbers. If anything, I actually think could be even higher. Maybe there's a lot of NAVI believers out there. I think you could go up to like 80% for this one. I do think it's the biggest mismatch of the first round.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think that the only way is, and I would be interested to know in the FURIA camp, do they think of themselves as the favorites? Has that got to them in any way, or are they just trying to like completely lock that out? I imagine Fallen would be trying to, but with some of these players, I assume they will be listening to the noise. And yeah, the Molodoy one is the interesting aspect where maybe you say, okay, we'll see how he does, but it feels like you're clutching at straws to make arguments rather than actually fully believing in them.
Now, the last one we'll do is if you go into the Futures tab, there's one where it is 2 teams, and it is, will this team win the major? So one of them is FURIA, and spoiler, now that Falcons is out, they are all the way up to 34%. Remember, against the entire field of the other, like, 6 teams or whatever. Well, 5 now. They are very, very high up. The other one is actually Spirit. Well, listen, I guess because of Donk or something. There's believers, like they're up at 28%. So on either of these, would you do a yes or no? Would you take FURIA to win at 34%? Would you say no to the Spirit one? Which angle do you like for this?
Yeah, I'm a little surprised not to see Vitality in there, because I feel like I'd have them higher than Spirit. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I love either of those odds. Like the FURIA one feels. It feels like there are slip-ups for them, like especially in that semi-final, if it ends up being a MOUZ. Like, I could see a world. We've seen the previous matchup go against them. And then for Spirit, listen, ZywOo obviously just played very well. I'm still not necessarily a believer that that's going to continue. I know everyone's very high on it right now. I've seen enough long-term that could just be a very good day for ZywOo. And he was the difference maker, and it still required an incredible donk performance. So I get that Spirit... You know, you want to have faith in them. You feel like they've got the form, but I would still feel like I'd favor Vitality there. So I don't think I could go with Spirit. So maybe the FURIA one, but yeah, even then, like that, it feels like there's slip-ups. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I'd feel good about either of those.
Well, the point is you can do yes or no. So I would say I don't hate if someone does yes for FURIA. I do think, especially now that there's all Falcons, they probably are on paper the most likely team to win. I just think Vitality win for, again, intangible reasons, class, form. They've been there before, all that jazz. With that said, though, I think actually, I would say, bearing in mind everyone's riding the high of the Spirit game, which did have a totally implausible ZywOo performance you won't get again. Today didn't have great stats, but even then he was like hitting a lot of his shots. I do understand why people are hyped. There is a world you imagine where if every Spirit player could really play to their peak, they could win this tournament. The problem is I just don't think they will. I mean, not only do they have to get past Vitality, I think whoever is in the final, even if it's MOUZ, they could probably still win. It's a BO5, remember. That's actually the biggest part people are missing about this tournament, because no one's got it in their brain yet. It's a BO5 final. Spirit's map pool is really rocky right now. Like, they will struggle to win 3 out of 5 against anyone. So I think actually, if you want to do FURIA, yes, I don't hate it. I love doing a no against Spirit. I think it's very high chances that they don't win, and I think this is fairly safe to take. All right, there is one other one. I tell you what, we can do this one other one, which is when you go then to the tab that says events. They do have one, which this will depend if people believe in Vitality, which says ZywOo will be the MVP of the Budapest Major. It is at 27%. Now, look, obviously, if you know how HLTV and people like that decide the MVP, you pretty much have to make the final. But the reason why I actually kind of like it at 27% is ZywOo is a pretty famous player to win the MVP, even in a losing effort. Like, that means he could go to the final. By the way, Modessy's done this. He could play against, like, Molodoi. Molodoi could look awesome and win a bunch of rounds, but he probably won't have the same stats ZywOo does, and ZywOo could win even if you lose. So I think that's actually quite a well-priced one, that personally. What do you think? Would you say, is he the most likely person to win MVP for you?
Yeah, I think I'd back that. Especially, we've already seen. I don't know how much they count this, but we've already seen an incredible performance. Yes, it's against the Mongols, but the stats are crazy.
No, he's got you Smurf for that first map, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we have seen a little bit lately when Vitality maybe aren't playing 100% perfect team-based CS. I do think we're getting a little more out of ZywOo, where it feels like he is just taking a bit more initiative. I think he's realized he has to do that. So I wouldn't mind that at all. I think if it is Vitality winning, you obviously have him. And like you said, there's a world in which for a FURIA, if they were to win in the final, they might have had enough of a team effort that it's more spread out and that there's not a clear candidate on their team. Whereas for ZywOo, you're right. If they make the final, I could still see him winning the MVPs. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I like that.
In fact, I even think the edgy angle people who are FURIA fans miss is Molodoi, because he's more of like the impact player than the crazy production numbers. If anything, I could see him looking awesome, winning a bunch of tournaments, and then Keserata just get the MVP. Keserata's the role and the style. Like, he just farms lurk kills. Like, that's one of the best ways to rack up massive numbers in losing or winning efforts. Okay, you see how easy it is. You just pick a market. Obviously, you don't have to do the analytical big brain angle we do. You just think, do you think yes or no? Does it make sense? You can also use it as kind of a guide of what the rest of the people are thinking out there in the scene. It's simple. You go to Kalshi.com, use promo code LFN, make your first $100 worth of trades, and you'll automatically receive a $10 bonus. That's Kalshi.com, code LFN, the CFTC regulated prediction market for esports and beyond.